The Silence of the Lambs may not have been the first movie to feature Hannibal Lecter, but its version of the character, with Anthony Hopkins' portrayal, made Hannibal an iconic, albeit very different, horror movie villain. The Silence of the Lambs is based on the novel by author Thomas Harris and was directed by Jonathan Demme. The movie is still regarded as one of the greatest horror films of all time, as well as a gripping crime thriller. It is also one of the rare movies to win all 5 major awards at the Oscars. Among those Oscar wins, Hopkins won the Best Actor trophy for his performance as Lecter, the brilliant but chilling psychiatrist-turned-incarcerated cannibal. Such accolades are rare for a performance in a horror film, but Lecter has proven his legendary status, still regarded as one of the greatest horror movie villains of all time. However, as effective as he is, Lecter differs from the likes of Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers in one key way, which further highlights Hopkins' brilliant performance. The Silence of the Lambs left Hannibal Lecter's darkest scenes to the imagination. Anthony Hopkins plays the violence hidden under the polite exterior. Quite rare for a horror villain, The Silence of the Lambs doesn't show Hannibal Lecter killing the majority of his victims. While other villains of the genre gain their notoriety largely through their gruesome kills, Lecter is a villain who has to rely on what the audience hears about his crimes. While this might seem like a risky approach, it is likely you didn't even notice this fact, thanks largely to Anthony Hopkins' performance, which sells the unseen moments. When Clarice Starling, Jodie Foster, arrives at the institution in which Lecter is imprisoned, Dr. Chilton, Anthony Heald, tells her of a story about Lecter attacking a nurse and nearly removing her entire jaw. It is an impactful story to hear right before meeting this character, but as soon as Hopkins appears on screen, he sells Lecter as a chilling villain capable of something like that. The camera follows Clarice down the rows of cells until it reaches the cell at the end where Lecter is standing ready for her, like he has been anticipating her arrival this whole time. The first person Lecter kills in the timeline of the movie is a fellow inmate named Miggs, who accosts Clarice as she is leaving her meeting with Lecter. The doctor clearly finds this to have been an unforgivably rude thing to do, and the audience learns that Miggs was found dead the next morning, having swallowed his tongue. The only clue was that Lecter was heard whispering to Miggs the entire night. Hopkins once again does heavy lifting with his acting, making the audience believe he is someone who could have talked someone else into killing themselves. One of the most iconic Lecter moments is another example of the audience hearing of his crimes rather than witnessing them. The famous quote from The Silence of the Lambs comes when Lecter is annoyed by Clarice's questioning and tells her, "A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti." It is confirmation that, below his chillingly calm demeanor, he has an animalistic side to him. It is true that Lecter's prison break shows more of this murderous side, including biting a man's face and beating another guard to death. However, The Silence of the Lambs doesn't focus on the killings themselves, but rather the gory aftermath of what Lecter leaves behind as Hopkins sells the rest. The other Hannibal movies added more violence with less impact. The sequels and prequels made Lecter less interesting. As brilliant as The Silence of the Lambs is, the other Hannibal Lecter movies have not come close to living up to that legacy. Anthony Hopkins has returned to his iconic role twice now, in 2001's Hannibal and 2002's Red Dragon. Both movies have their positive qualities, with Hopkins' performance being a highlight in both cases. However, the other installments in the franchise failed to see the uniqueness of Lecter as a horror villain and how much they can rely on Hopkins' performance to see the terrifying aspects of the character. Red Dragon is another movie that finds Lecter behind bars for the majority of the runtime, but the opening prologue shows his showdown with Will Graham, Edward Norton. While it is a brief scene and doesn't result in Lecter killing anyone, it is more graphic and blunt in its violence compared to the nuanced approach of The Silence of the Lambs. Hannibal and Hannibal Rising are far less concerned about hiding Lecter's killings. Hannibal sees Lecter dispensing some genuinely gory moments, including disemboweling a police officer and the infamous scene of Lecter forcing a man to eat his own brains. The prequel Hannibal Rising is even more graphic as it follows young Lecter on his mission of revenge, killing each member of a group of Nazi soldiers who killed and ate his sister. In both cases, the movies deliver on the gore but make Hannibal a much less interesting character. No moment in these films makes Lecter scarier than that simple image of him patiently waiting for Clarice in his cell. Even Hannibal's most chilling kill remains a mystery. The fate of Dr. Chilton is left to the audience to imagine. While The Silence of the Lambs is able to make the audience unsettled simply by telling them what Lecter did, his most iconic killing and most disturbing is one where the audience still doesn't know what really happened. Following his prison break, Lecter largely disappears from The Silence of the Lambs. That is, until the end of the movie, when Clarice has solved the Buffalo Bill case, and she receives a phone call from Lecter, who is in hiding. After checking in with Clarice, Lecter leaves her with the chilling final line, "I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner." It is then revealed that Lecter is secretly watching Dr. Chilton, who is fleeing the country and going into hiding now that Lecter is on the loose. However, as the Silence of the Lambs ends, Chilton walks down the street, unaware that Lecter is patiently following behind him. That is the last the audience sees of Dr. Chilton. In Hannibal, it is revealed that he went missing shortly after this and is presumed dead. However, unlike Lecter's other victims, there is no confirmation of what happened. Thus, it is left up to the audience's imagination, and unfortunately for Chilton, the imagination goes to some pretty disturbing places in this case. Lecter nonchalantly killed a census taker for annoying him, so it is terrifying to consider what he would do to Chilton, the one character in The Silence of the Lambs who Lecter truly hates.